Alright? So, first up on your picture is the driver. This big stinky bag of shit liked to keep himself to himself. He was bloody handy behind the wheel, although that didn't make up for him being a white useless cunt at everything else. And then there was old Simpson. He was a character, an individual, but to him taking the piss was frankly more important than doing the bloody job. Then you had Nick Cannon, self-titled master of true crime, whatever the fuck that meant. He was a fucking yank, but he was likeable enough despite that. He did a bit of the old Bruce Lee stuff, black belt in origami, know what I mean? They were all after the big boss, Mr. Black Magic himself. He didn't really have a name, but you just knew that you didn't want to mess with him. He was the daddy. You so much as look at him one, he'll stick a 12 ball down your throat and turn your neck into a water fountain. Madder than a coked up Frankie Fraser, the butcher of the streets. But the other guys had an ace up their sleeve. Something sophisticated, know what I mean? Something classy. All the way from land and town. Guns, blades, women, diamonds, nuclear subs, apples and pears, knees up mother bran. Lock up your daughters, cause here comes the Getaway. In 2001, Grand Theft Auto 3 changed the game. We know that already. 3 years previously, a small British film did a bit of game changing itself. Guy Ritchie's Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. It was the second half of a kick-up-the-arse to British cinema that was started by Trainspotting a couple of years previous, an oh-so-cool slice of late 90s schlock, but with tons of attitude. Right from the off it swaggered around like it owned the place because, well, it kinda did. The film was massive, and in the years immediately afterwards there was a shit ton of British gangster films, a whole new wave of them. Some tried to capture the lock stock magic with varying degrees of success. Equally brilliant films like Sexy Beast
Gotta change my shirt, it's sticking to me, I'm sweating like a cunt.
and, well, Love, Honour and Obey. It was basically the same thing that happened in the US when Pulp Fiction came out a few years previously, a film that Lock, Stock was certainly inspired by, but it had enough to stick out on its own. And Guy Ritchie's 2000 follow-up, Snatch, proved that he wasn't actually a flash in the pan. In fact, it was even better.
Heavy! Shut up and sit down, you big bald fuck!
Now this new wave of British gangster call actually lasted quite a while, and it was inevitable that a game would come along to try and get a piece of the pie. And so, here's The Getaway, a 2002 game for the PS2, tasked with the double cape of trying to get a bit of that Guy Ritchie feel into a game, as well as getting some ground off of Grand Theft Auto 3, the sandbox kin that everyone was already calling one of the greatest games ever made. So yeah, not easy. As it happens, The Getaway was in development for quite a while, well before GTA 3 in fact. Headed up by an ambitious Aussie by the name of Brendan McNamara, The Getaway was originally set for release in 2000. It started out as an open-world driving game for the PS1, but then evolved into a PS2 launch title that aimed to recreate, in full, a whole 70 square miles of London town. Pretty ambitious, eh? In the end, The Getaway wasn't able to get close to this target. It did, however, manage to recreate 10 square miles of the capital. And still, doing that took a fuck of a long time. The engine needed to be up for it, and a system needed to be devised so that the city could load procedurally, depending on where the character was. It simply wasn't possible for the whole city to be loaded into memory at once. And of course, yeah, recreating London. All of this meant that The Getaway was delayed by a couple of years, eventually arriving in December 2002, by which time GTA 3 wasn't a competition anymore. It was Rockstar's even better sequel, the almost incomparable Vice City. So yeah, again, no pressure. As we'll find out later on, Brendan McNamara kinda knows all about ambitious projects that get held up for years on end. But still, The Getaway was going to try and do some things very differently from other open world games, which we'll get into shortly. First though, what the bloody hell's it all about? Well, you play as a geezer named Mark Hammond. You were an armed robber, then you spent some time in the clink, and now you're out and running a nightclub. Everything's hunky-dory, innit? Look, here's your lovely wife taking the kid out in the first scene of the game. And here's your wife getting shoved in a fridge, also in the first scene of the game. And so your son gets kidnapped by this old fuck named Charlie Jolson, and he's going to use you to take London over again so he can, I don't know, sit outside Buckingham Palace smoking a cigar and being bored.
Where's my son, you fat bastard?
You don't have much choice except to work for him, taking on other gangs like the Yardies, the 14K Triads, as well as the Collins crew you used to pal around with, all the while trying desperately to find your son on the side before Charlie just gets bored. Now you might well be thinking that this plot sounds a little teensy-weensy bit shit. And that's because it is. I mean, geez, it's filled with bad Cockney accents and even worse lines. The most generic and awkward you can get. This isn't exactly film quality. It's barely TV quality. Bluntly put, I've seen more convincing and threatening East End gangsters on episodes of EastEnders than I have in this game. Still, the crappy plot is the least of the Getaway's problems.
Fucking manners!
We'll get to all that in a bit though. I would like to talk about some of the things the game does differently, and some of the things that it does well. The first thing that immediately sticks out when playing the game is that the Getaway goes for a totally HUDless interface. If nothing else, it's utterly dedicated to being cinematic as all hell. When you're driving, the indicators give you an idea of the direction you need to go in, an unobtrusive system that I actually wish people would use more, because driving around the city kinda loses its charm when there's massive indicators and lines telling you exactly where you need to go. This is also one of the first games to use regenerating health. Mark's current state is signified by his movement, and he can lean on a wall for a bit to regain his strength. It's kind of weird, but still, it's kinda less so seeing as it's used in a crap ton of games now anyway. The complete lack of any on-screen info is quite a bold step, and it almost works. It certainly helps make the game look immersive. Another big immersion point comes from that recreation of London. It took a hell of a long time, but considering the PS2 hardware at their disposal, Team Soho did a fantastic job. You get plenty of landmarks, the city streets, and amazingly all the shops and whatnot are totally real. I find this quite stunning, something that almost couldn't happen today in fact. I mean, did no one care? All the licensing involved here would have just been ludicrous. And yet the only stink waste was with BT, who complained about a van with their logo on it being used in the game. You couldn't get away with any of this now, could you? Another positive is that even if the whole city can't be loaded into memory, there are no pauses for loading or anything like that. The game switches nicely between interiors and exteriors, and driving is smooth. Again, it makes the game feel immersive, at least for a little while. However, the Getaway is kind of ruined totally when you actually have to play it. There are some aspects of the gameplay that can be put down to the infancy of the whole third-person open-world genre, but it still really hasn't held up well at all. Driving is an oversensitive, twitchy nightmare where even the slightest turn feels like you just yanked the handbrake out the column. It's not helped by the Getaway's faithful recreation of driving in London, the eternally busy roads, the convoluted one-way system. Yeah, London isn't actually the best city for an open world game, and this is probably the main reason why. I mean, the only way it could be more infuriating is if there was a congestion charge DLC system involved. But it really falls apart when you get out on foot. The camera is hopeless and makes it so awkward to scope your surroundings. Why, for instance, does free look require holding down a shoulder button when the right analog stick's sitting there doing nothing? Still, figuring shit out, of course. But free aim is also a complete nightmare. The dedication to a HUDless interface means there's no crosshair, meaning you have to use the gun itself to line up shots. For an easy pointer as to how well this usually works out, I refer you to the almighty Jurassic Park Trespasser. This is a lesser but still painful example. Thankfully there is an auto-aim to make gunfights a bit less painful, but it's still awkward. And as someone who generally prefers to use free aim in games like this if the option's available, I find the combat here totally underwhelming. In fact, it smacks entirely of a PS1 title. It's worth remembering that the Getaway started out purely as a driving sim, and all the on-foot stuff was added later. And hoo boy does it show. Moving anywhere is just, well, horrible, and totally breaks the immersion that the game so carefully tried to create. And let's not even get into how painful the typical early 2000s compulsory stealth missions are. It's the sort where you can walk up to a guy in a busy art gallery, he'll tell you you're not allowed in here, and you can simply walk behind him and casually snap his neck. And all the while, no one else is batting an eyelid. Thankfully, most of them don't automatically result in failure if you're discovered, so you may as well just go in all guns blazing and not bother with it. So, to summarise, The Getaway did try to do some things that were new and unique, and some of them even worked. However, it's kind of hamstrung by the way it plays. It talks the talk, but it damn well don't walk the walk. I've covered a couple of these GTA wannabes now, along with other third-person action games of the PS1, PS2 vintage, and this is a pretty lousy one that's probably not worth checking out again. It certainly doesn't hold a candle to something like True Crime Streets of LA, for example. Still, the magazines did love it at the time. It was a AAA title after all, so naturally the reviews were good. Sales weren't too bad either, although it obviously got swept clean away by GTA Vice City, which came out around the same time and tore through everything in its path, including this game. But if you are interested in looking at The Getaway again, it's not exactly difficult to find. I picked up a copy of it in a CEX for 50 frickin' pence, and considering that you also get a second story after you finish the first one, that's quite a lot of game for your buck. And yeah, it did sell enough for a sequel. Brendan McNamara stepped away at this point, going back to his native Australia and founding a company called Team Bondi, which he'd set to work on another even more ambitious project. LA Noire took 7 years and tried a few of the same tricks, including a massive, accurate recreation of Los Angeles circa the 1950s. Kind of interesting to actually look at this game and perhaps see some of the motivation behind LA Noire. Still, that's a pretty big game, one that's best saved for a later video. For now though, let's look at The Getaway's sequel, The Getaway Black Monday, which hit the shelves in 2004. So, what's different? Well, not a lot to be honest. A bit more effort went into the plot this time. We're still in London, but it's a wholly different story that has you controlling 3 separate characters at points. There's Mitch, an SO19 copper, Eddie, an amateur boxer, and Sam, a scammer. So yeah, you get the same interlinking stories as in the first, only this time they're actually all together instead of having to play through the game once to get the second story. Now all that's not to say that the plot's much good. It's what you'd expect really. Because, you know, ask yourself, what's the first thing that you'd add to a crime story sequel if you had absolutely no good ideas whatsoever? Bingo! Russians. Bloody Russians. Lots of Russians, with their fast cars, ugly-ass clothes, and ridiculous comedy Sergei Lemire-cat accents. The cutscenes are all decent quality for the time and all that, but ooh, boy are they boring. The voice acting doesn't help much either, because that's pretty damn bad too. Mitch, even in explosive situations, sounds more like he's commentating on a golf tournament rather than leading a squad and shooting goons. And yeah, there's all those stupid accents.
Lights! This fucking country. I want a man's cigarette.
The Chinese and Jamaican stuff in the first game was bad enough, and the Russian stuff here kinda takes the cake. Aside from that, frankly not a whole lot has changed. London's still the same and the gameplay is still largely the same. It's still a pain in the arse to drive around, the camera beats entirely to its own drum, and movement is just a freaking pain no matter what. The only slight plus points are that the right analog stick actually does free look this time around, and the button layout's been changed to pretty much just rip GTA off totally, which you may as well do after all. But honestly, there's really not too much else to say. The game is still the same mix of driving, shooting and occasional stealth, and without any meat in the story or characters or everything, it's all quite repetitive. The game offers nothing different from the original. And in fact, in some areas the gameplay's a hell of a lot worse. A few glitches and bugs seem to have been added to the mix. The auto-aim feature is just horrendous. Sometimes there can be a guy firing right next to you, and you can hammer the R1 button all you like, you still won't be able to target them. And sometimes the game, well, it's just hands. Not to crash, you can usually restart from a checkpoint, but everything just stops. The game could have really done with all the on-foot and combat stuff being sharpened up, but as it goes they've actually managed to make it worse than the original game in that regard. It all just feels like a chore. The same PS1 style stand and shoot combat, the same twitchy driving, over and over again until you reach the finish line. That didn't matter as much the first time around, but this is an unworthy sequel that's only of any interest whatsoever if you actually happen to like the plot. And, geez. You could just watch any crime film instead, you know? Like even some straight-to-DVD tosh with Danny Dyer in it would be 1,000 times better. Black Monday's feeble return was picked up on a bit by mags and the like. The game received pretty mixed reviews and it wasn't a massive seller. Something that certainly wasn't helped by the game basically coming out head to head against Grand Theft Auto again. Black Monday came out only a couple of weeks after Grand Theft Auto San Andreas hit the shelves. So would you really play this when San Andreas is right there? The best and most complete sandbox action game of the whole era? It's not much of a contest, is it? Maybe someone honestly thought that the Getaway could be a GTA beta, but, well, no. They were in for a pretty rude awakening. These days, Black Monday probably isn't remembered as one of the worst of all the PS2 sandbox action games, and it probably shouldn't be. The likes of Sopranos Road to Respect and Reservoir Dogs are on the horizon after all, but it's still quite bad. If you honestly want to check it out then, once again, it's pretty common and very cheap. You really shouldn't pay more than a quid for this. So, what happened in the end? Well, there is another tangentially related game to the series. Team Soho went on to produce Gangs of London for the PSP, a badly received title that's basically just about picking a gang and going to war with the others. I can't cover it here, but it seems like it's the Getaway, only with the gameplay and no story. Yeah, sounds brilliant. And there were plans for a third Getaway game for the PS3. A technical demo was shown at E3 in 2005, but as of 2009 the game was described as on hold, having previously been described as cancelled in 2008. So yeah, chances are pretty good that that game's a stiff, and I rather doubt that the Getaway will be making a surprise return anytime soon. If the spirit of the series lives on anywhere, it lives in LA Noire, by the guy who originally created it, which is a wholly different game, but possesses some of the Getaway's better qualities and feels like an upgrade of what the original game was going for, particularly when it comes to recreating cities. For all the hype that the Getaway got during its time, it ended up being a bit of an also-ran, with no one particularly interested in winning it back. It's kind of a shame, to be honest, as it would still be cool to see a proper London gangster game for all the challenges that the city represents. But, well, we're just gonna have to hold our horses on that one, aren't we? Hey ho.
It's been emotional.
Hey everyone, if you liked this video then maybe you'd like to comment. Maybe you'd even like to hit the like button, you know, like. And if you really liked the video, maybe you'd even want to subscribe. I mean, gee, I don't know, maybe anyway. You could even follow me on Twitter if you want, if you cared enough. Anyway, that's all the plugging over, so thank you for watching, and as ever, wherever you are, whoever you be, have a good one, take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.